This lesson will be on using TI-30X2, TI-83, or TI-84 calculators to perform some advanced calculations using scientific notation. Not terribly advanced, but a bit more complicated. I assume that you can do basic calculations with scientific notation and that you know how to put your calculator in a mode where it displays all the answers in that notation. I have all the answers here shown in scientific notation to 3 significant figures. You can watch previous lessons for learning about those. In this lesson, I won't show you pictures of the calculator screens. You can do the calculations yourself and compare your answers to those given here. First, we'll take the reciprocal of a number in scientific notation. As a reminder, the reciprocal of a number is what you get when you divide 1 by that number, and equivalent notation for the reciprocal of a number x is just x to the minus 1. Let's take the reciprocal of 8.75 times 10 to the 4th. Here are the keystrokes. 8.75, second, EE4. Now we hit the x to the minus 1 key on the calculator, which on the TI-83 or 84 is there. On the TI-30 it's right there. Now we hit the enter key. The result in the notation used by the TI-83 and 84 is 1.14 E minus 5. But you should always write it out in actual scientific notation, at least if you want full credit. This is what the TI-30 will show, and that's the way you should write it on your homework assignments. Notice how few keystrokes it took to do this problem. That's because the calculator treats the 8.75 second EE4 as a single number in its memory, and that lets us do these calculations with fewer keystrokes. Time for another. Now we'll square a number. This is fairly simple, and actually simpler to do than it is to write. We want to square the number 3.25 times 10 to the minus 6th, but to write it correctly we have to wrap the number in parentheses. Because of the versatility of the scientific notation entry on the calculator, we won't have to use parentheses when we do the calculation. The keystrokes are 3.25, second, EE. Now it's got a negative exponent. I use that minus sign wrapped in parentheses. And then 6. We're done entering the number, although the calculator would still accept additional digits for the exponent. It treats everything we've entered so far as a single number, so to square it, we just have to hit the x squared key. There it is on the TI-83, there it is on the TI-30, and then enter. That's the way the TI-83 would show it. Here's the way the TI-30 will show it. And that's the way you should write it on a homework assignment. Once again, we were able to take full advantage of the fact that the calculator treats the entire 3.25 second EE minus 6 as a single number in its memory. Moving right along, we can do more than just square numbers. We can raise a number to a power other than 2. In this example, we're going to be raising a number to the 5th power, but this same technique and the keystrokes we use would work for negative powers or decimal powers. You could raise a number to the 3.29 power if you wanted to. But here are the keystrokes for this problem. 5.29 second EE. We've got a negative exponent on that 10, so we use the minus sign wrapped in parentheses, and then the 6. Now we want to raise that number to the 5th power, so we use the caret key for that. That's where it is on the 83 or 84. That's where it is on the TI-30. And now the exponent 5, and enter. The calculation's done, and the calculator shows 4.14 E minus 27, at least that's what the TI-83 and 84 show. The TI-30 shows the correct scientific notation version of it, which is the way you should write it, 4.14 times 10 to the minus 27th. Let's take the square root of a number. In this case, 6.88 times 10 to the 14th. This calculation is a bit different than the others in that you input the function before you input the number. Here are the keystrokes. We start off by hitting the second button, and we have to push this button first because the square root is in the writing above the x squared key. So second, square root. This key is here on the TI-84 or 83 and there on the TI-30. Now we can input the number 6.88 second EE 14. Now I've got this shown. It's optional. You don't need to input that left or the right parenthesis if all we're doing is taking the square root. Later in this lesson I'll show you one where we do have to take care of that, but sometimes to end taking the square root you would put that right parenthesis. Now we can do the enter. The calculation's done, and the TI-83 or 84 will show 2.62 E7. The TI-30 shows the correct scientific notation, which is the way you should write it, 2.62 times 10 to the 7th. Now on to a somewhat more complicated calculation. This will be multiplying two numbers together, but each number is raised to a power, and so we have to take care of that thing first, although that's not the way we type it in. To clearly write the problem down, we have to wrap each number in parentheses, but you'll see that we don't need parentheses for the calculator. There will be quite a few keystrokes for this problem, so I'll have them in two columns. 6.23 second EE4. Now this number I want to raise to the fourth power, so I hit the caret key and then the 4. I've taken care of that first number raised to the fourth power. Now I multiply it by 5.93 second EE. That one has a negative exponent on it, so I use the minus sign wrapped in parentheses, and then the 5. Now this number gets raised to the minus 3, so I use the caret key again, and minus sign wrapped in parentheses, and the 3. And that's it. I just hit enter. There's the answer the TI-83 or 84 shows. There's the number that the TI-30 shows, and that's the way you should write it if you're putting it down on paper. Let's do another. This number combines a square root with a division problem. Once you've mastered things like this, you'll be able to do all sorts of complicated things on your calculator. On this one, since we start with a square root, we need to use the second key right off the bat. So second, and then square root. Now we enter the number under the square root, 2.57 second EE3. I'm done entering that number under the square root, but now I need to finish the square root or get out from under it. Otherwise, the entire calculation will take place under the square root, and that number in the denominator doesn't belong there. To finish the square root on the TI-30 or TI-83, you use the right parenthesis. On my TI-84, I downloaded a new operating system, and with that I would use the right arrow key to get out from under the radical. I would guess that any new TI-84 that you purchase will come with this automatically. But however you do it, you need to get out from under that radical. Once you do that, either with the right arrow key or the right parenthesis, it's time to do the division. So you hit the divided by. Now we've got that denominator number to put in, 3.42, second, EE 13, and enter. The TI 83 or 84 shows that. The TI 30 shows the correct scientific notation, 1.48 times 10 to the minus 12th, and that's the way you should write it on paper. One last problem now. This one is fairly complex, and it looks intimidating. We'll go through this step by step, though, and see how it comes out. One thing we'll have to be careful of is that there are two numbers multiplied together in the denominator of the fraction, and we need to take that into account. But we start by putting in the numerator, 5.71 second EE, minus sign wrapped in parentheses, 24. So there's our numerator, divided by. Now, because there are two numbers multiplied together in the denominator, we need to tie those together. And we want the division to treat this as a single number. We do that by wrapping the denominator in parentheses. So we start off with a left parenthesis, and we'll end the denominator with a right parenthesis. But first we put in those numbers. 9.71 second EE. It's got a negative exponent, so minus sign wrapped in parentheses, 2. This number gets cubed, so we do that with the caret symbol and a 3. That number's in. We multiply it by the second number times 1.99 second EE3. We're done putting numbers into the denominator, but we need to finish the denominator off, tell the calculator we're done with the denominator, by hitting the right parenthesis. Notice for that complicated thing in the denominator, all I needed was a left parenthesis and a right parenthesis to take care of that. That finishes our entry of the numbers. We just hit enter, and the answer will display 3.13 E minus 24 on the TI 83 and 84, 3.13 times 10 to the minus 24th on the TI 30, which is the way you should write it. That's it for this lesson. What you've learned in these should enable you to do most calculations that you'll run into. Almost anything worse than this is a combination of things that we've already done in these lessons.